Hi, my name is Jim Bunkelman. I'm a singlet that was married to a multiple for 15 years. She passed away in 2012, and since then I've had a goal of educating the public about multiplicity. I'm going to talk about how partners, friends, coworkers, and anyone can support plurals. This is just my opinions. It's from my experiences and just things that have worked with me and things that I feel are right. I'm not really comfortable with talking in front of a camera, so excuse my hesitations and anything like that. Um, I don't really use the term DID. That's because I really don't consider multiplicity in and of itself to be a disorder. It's a technique of survival. It's a way that a person has developed to survive. And it's not a disorder in and of itself. There may be problems with individuals with PTSD, with depression and things like that, but it's not about the being multiple. It's about each individual. Uh, I don't use alters because the people in the system are not alternatives. They are real individuals. Um, I don't use parts too much, but a lot of people use parts. These are just words that people tend to use, and they have different meanings. Rhonda and I used insiders. We called our people in her system insiders. I use the word multiple and multiplicity because that's what I'm used to. That's what I worked with Rhonda, and that feels good in my experience. There are other experiences and different words that can be used to describe what's going on. I met Rhonda when she was a production manager at a company that I was doing freelance work in video and graphics. And we were just hit it off. We were good friends for probably 2 years before we started dating. And about, I guess 3 weeks after we were dating, her sister let slip that Rhonda was a multiple. And Rhonda was, of course, very frightened because she thought maybe that would scare me away. And it didn't at all. It seemed very natural to me. My background is in physics, and I'm used to things that seem very strange or weird, but they're actually very true. And they're only strange or weird because our experience is limited. We're not used to it. If there are certain animals in the world that to us seem very weird and strange, but to the people that live there where the animals exist, it's just ordinary. And that's how I feel about multiplicity. It's a survival technique that allows the child to survive in a terrible situation. Most multiplicity is due to childhood trauma, usually before the age of 6 to 8. And it's a way for the child to survive. I'm a supporter of the structural theory of multiplicity. At the end of this, I'll add links to different places where you can find out more information about what I'm talking about. So anyway, Rhonda and I started meeting people in her system. Uh, and I really liked it. I really enjoyed meeting all the different people, meeting the different stories, the different things they liked. I got a family. I got a family, I got friends, I got companions. I had a wonderful life with Rhonda. We did amazing things. We had a lot of friends. Most of our friends knew about Rhonda's multiplicity. We didn't really make a big deal out of it because it's just the way she was. And everybody accepted her completely. She was loved by so many people. We talk about a system, which is the system is the group of people, individuals, whatever, that are in a person's system, in their mind. And when I say in their mind, it's not that they're made up, it's in their brain. It's a real thing. I can't stress how real this is. This is not something that's made up. It's not something that's made up for attention or any of that. This is real, and this affects a lot of people. So the system is that group. And one of the things about a system is that generally they try to work on a democracy. There is almost like a government. The brain is an amazing organ. If you think about all of the incredible things that the brain can do, uh, it's there are people that can look at a city from an airplane and then go back and draw that accurately, perfectly from just memory. There are people that can play concerts, classical musical concerts that I can't even imagine getting your fingers to do all of those things. Uh, there are people that can add up numbers, multiply, divide, things that you would think it very weird, but it's a thing that the brain can do. It's very amazing. And the fact that the brain can develop this system to save the child, to save them in a situation where there's horrible trauma, that is really an amazing, just beautiful thing. Uh, the problem is that when a system that has been set up to save a person in their life, when that threat is gone, it can sometimes cause problems with what's going on. And so I think it's one of the words that I don't use also is cure. I don't think that multiplicity needs to be cured. It is not a problem in and of itself. I think that the individuals within the system uh, might have to do therapy for PTSD, for depression, for things like that, but it's not caused by the multiplicity. Multiplicity in and of itself is not a disorder. You can treat the individuals in the system for various disorders, but it's not a disorder in itself. There is such a thing as healthy multiplicity. And I believe fully in that. I believe that my wife Rhonda was a healthy multiple. We had a wonderful life together. I remember at one point, this is like one of the most incredible things that in my life was one of the kids came to me and said, "We didn't think we could ever be happy, but we are now." And that was pretty amazing. Anyway, the, one of the things about systems is that a lot of them, most of them are run kind of as a democracy. There's a government going on. There are people in charge of various things. You can run a system. There were people in charge of certain groups, and they help them function, help them get along. Uh, when you think, the media has portrayed multiplicity as evil, as there's somebody inside there that's going to harm you. And I'll tell you that there is less chance of being harmed by a multiple than by a singlet. Uh, and one of those reasons is because of this government, because of this democracy. There are checks and balances going on in their systems that singlets don't have. And I would be much more frightened by a singlet than a multiple. Uh, they're just, they're not dangerous, any more dangerous than the general public. And that's one of the things that if you're talking with someone who's a multiple, you don't immediately ask, is there somebody in there that's going to hurt me? Do I have to be careful? It's just like you don't go to someone's house and say, is there somebody in your family that's going to hurt me? Is there somebody in the other room that's going to cause me harm? That's just rude. There's a lot less risk than going to somebody's house of family that you don't know. There's a very good guide written by the Freya Spirit and the Irenes about how to engage people that are multiples. How singlets, it's a very good guide. It's a guide to the workplace, but it really applies to just everything in general. Um, the biggest thing to remember is that when you are talking to an insider, as we call them, you're talking to a real individual. You're not talking to somebody that's pretending to be somebody. You're talking to somebody who is completely, not completely, who's very different from maybe who you thought that you were talking to. It's a different person. And one of the things is to engage with them. At one of the conferences that I was speaking at, I spoke with someone, and he had been at my presentation the year before, and he had discovered that his wife was a multiple, and he was really just upset about it. It was like, that's not what he signed up for. He just wanted his wife. He didn't want anyone else. And so he just kind of ignored them. And that just doesn't work. And he said that after listening to my presentation and seeing how engaged I was with everyone in Rhonda's system and how wonderful it was, that he started engaging with people. And he found it worked so much better. And it became a much easier thing to do. Just know that the people in the system are real, and just engage with them. I had such a wonderful time with everyone in Rhonda's system. Um, there are problems, and anyone that's a partner of a multiple knows the things that you go through. It's very difficult at times. Even with Rhonda and I, there were some hard times. There were some difficult things. It was just worth it. It was really worth it. And you love someone, and you work with them, and this is part of them, and it's it can be a positive thing. If you're a partner or a supporter of a multiple, one of the really great things to do, it's the little things that really mean a lot. It's the little things that show them that they are safe and they are loved. Uh, that's really Those are the two most important things that you can show a multiple. Show them that they're safe. That is one of the most important things to them, and that they are loved and that they can trust you. And it's sometimes just little things that really show that. Um, my friend Bob was talking about how when he went to ask his wife to marry him, and she's a multiple, he took her to Key West to ask her. And the reason he did that was because it was the furthest point in the United States away from her abuser. And that seems like a little thing, but it's a really big thing. And it's also shows that he understands. And little things like that really mean a lot. A system can contain all ages of people. Rhonda's system consisted of everyone from babies to young children to teenagers to adults to an older woman, and even a dog named Speak. It was a very happy dog. Uh, and the way you relate to them is the way you would relate to anyone at that age. Um, with the babies, Rhonda had four babies, and I would just give them love. Love. They didn't talk. One of the babies spoke in sort of baby talk. I had no idea what he was saying, but he loved to talk to me, and I would listen. Uh, but there are a lot of little things that you can do to show them that they're safe and loved. This is the first Christmas at our house with Rhonda and my family, and this is the kids. Every kid got a present of their very own. Um, there was one little girl, and one night when I was brushing my teeth before going to bed, and I spit out the toothpaste, and she heard me, and she came up and repeated the sound she heard and said, "Plah." And so I said "Plah" back to her, and it became a thing with us. And that every night before we went to bed, I would say "Plah" to her, or she would say "Plah" to me, and we would have a contest to see who could do it first. You'd have to wait till the right time, but then you'd try and be the first person to say "Plah" to them. And just that little tradition showed her that I was loving her and that I thought of her each day and that she mattered. And those are the things that really help. Um, if I was away on a job, I would call at night and say "Plah" to her on the phone, and just do things like that. One of the people that you'll often find in a system is a protector. And the protector is the person who was the person who protected the system. That's the protector. They were often really badass. They were seemingly hard to get along with, they were the ones that were really tough and resisted and made sure that nobody harmed anyone and that they were going to fight first before they got hurt. And most systems have a protector or more than one protector. Uh, Rhonda's system, there was a protector named Ruby. And before I met Ruby, all the kids and the people I knew said, stay away from Ruby. Look out for Ruby. They kept telling me, look out for Ruby. You just you don't want to make her mad. Just stay away from Ruby. So I was prepared for Ruby. And I finally met her, and she was tough. She's the person who put me through the most tests. I went through a lot of tests to make sure that I could be trusted. And that was a good thing, I think, because the system, people in the system need to know that you can be trusted. And the protector, this Ruby, put me through the tests, and I passed. And so Ruby started warming up a little bit, and I saw Ruby, and I thought, I felt that there was a really warm, loving person there. And so what I did was I started teasing Ruby in a really loving way. Whenever I saw her smile, I'd start calling her Dimples, and she hated that. She's not Dimples because she's tough. And so I'd call her Dimples and smile and give her a lot of love. And this went on and for a while, and she started telling me that, well, she started smiling more and more. And then she told me that her face hurt because she had never smiled before. And this was a new thing for her. The muscles in her face did not smile. So she had to get used to that. In fact, one year at Christmas, Ruby gave me this. And this is the heart that, and she said that I showed her that she had a heart. And she was one of my strongest supporters in the system. And it was funny, there were, Jake and Jeremy were two littles that were in Ruby's circle. And one time I bought, they used to call Ruby Taz from the Tasmanian Devil, because Taz was just a whirling devil, and they would call her, so their nickname for Ruby was Taz. And I bought them a soft pillow that was just was Taz. It was like a stuffed Taz, and they would hold it and they would start singing, "My Ruby's so soft, my Ruby's so soft," and she would always complain and say, "No, I'm not. No, I'm not." But she was. She really was. One night, Rhonda was dressing up in a robe and a fedora hat. She turned around and I saw this happy little girl with a slightly goofy smile. Her tongue was hanging out and she was laughing. It was someone that I hadn't met before. So I asked who it was, and I was incredibly surprised to find out that it was baby Ruby. And Ruby had decided that I was safe enough, I was okay, and she could let baby Ruby out. Baby Ruby was the happy-go-lucky little girl that Ruby was before she had to become the protector. It was Ruby felt that I was safe and she could let baby Ruby out. And whenever we saw a cartoon or a drawing of someone with their tongue out, baby Ruby and I start laughing, we'd stick our tongues out and laugh together. And that was the tradition that she and I had together. I'm going to just tell you some stories about how I interacted with Rhonda's system and how I interacted with people in her system. And just it's sort of ways that if you are a partner supporter of a multiple, it's these little things that can really be big things and really help your relationship. One of the things I did was whenever anyone came out, that was especially the littles and the teenagers and the young children, I would give them a little stuffed animal that was theirs. And I did that for various reasons. One is that so that they would have something that was just theirs. It wasn't anyone else's, it belonged to them. And also because it would be a link to me, and that they could see it even if I wasn't around. They could see that little animal and know that I loved them, know that I cared for them. And so they each got something, and I would keep I had a little collection. I started off with larger stuffed animals, but as there got to be more and more littles in the system, we had to go to smaller, like little Beanie Baby size, because we had so many stuffed animals. But each one had a story, and each one meant something. Uh, we had a story. One of the one of the young children had a lot of problem with her stomach, and so as we were looking for something for her, we actually did it together, and we were. She wanted a bunny, and so the first bunny we found was like kind of small. It wasn't very significant, and then we found another bunny, and it was like way too big. We liked it, but it was just really too big. And then we found another bunny, and it was just right. And he was called Funny Tummy Bunny, because when she held it, it helped her stomach and it helped her feel better. But we would tell that story about choosing. About the first one was too small, second one was way too big, and the third one was just right. We would tell it to each other, and it developed a tradition. We had a tradition that made a bond, and it also had made her feel that she was part of a family, and that we were a family that was lasting and was together. Uh, it, we had another. This was this was later on. This young girl came out, and her name was Dot, and she was very cynical and just kind of like, oh yeah, right. She was like a teenager. She was a 12 or 13-year-old teenage girl. So when she came out and I met her and I said, wait, I'll be right back. And she goes, I know what you're going to do. You're going to get me one of those little stuffed animals. And I go, maybe. So I walked out, and this was pure luck. I looked in and I had a little Dalmatian. Uh, and so I took it and walked back and I handed it to her. And here was a Dalmatian. And what was it covered with? Dots. So that kind of won her over. Yeah, she thought that was pretty amazing. Um, we had a lot of a little girl who had ringing in her ears, and she saw them as triangles, flying triangles that would come. And she had ringing in her ears because she'd been hit in her ears. And so I found a little unicorn, and we called him Magicorn. And whenever the triangles would come, we would take Magicorn and we would just go pew, pew, and we would shoot down the triangles. And after we killed off all the triangles, the ringing would stop for her. So it was little things like that that would really mean a lot and really help um, with just the love and with the relationship. So I'll tell you about some of the people in Rhonda's system, and how we related, and just to show examples of how you can relate to the littles, to the young children, to the teenagers. So Abigail was about 6 years old, 6 or 7, and she held a lot of the abuse. She used to hide in closets and hide in small spaces a lot. And she stuttered so badly that you couldn't understand anything she was saying. She, you could talk with her and she would understand you, but she couldn't talk back. So I started reading books to her. I started reading at bedtime. We'd read a little bit each time. And so I did that for about maybe 2 or 3 years. We would read, and we thought about learning sign language, but we just didn't quite do that. But Abigail wanted to talk to me so badly. And after reading to her for 2 or 3 years, she started speaking. She still had a stutter, but it was under control, and I could understand what she was saying. And one of the things that I would read to her was the Harry Potter books. And so we would read like a few pages each night, and she loved Harry Potter. Uh, she just loved that. So when the movies came, now Abigail was a little girl that was very shy, especially with her stutter. She didn't talk to anybody, and she was very shy. She hid a lot. And so when the first movie came out, we went there opening day. We were there to see it. And we sat down in the theater, and sitting next to her was a young boy, probably 10 years old, 10 to 11, and suddenly they were talking. And he, as far as he knew, he was talking to a 45-year-old woman, but it was Abigail, and Abigail was having a conversation with this boy that she had just met. That had never happened before, but she felt that this was something she knew. She knew Harry Potter, and so she could talk to him about that. So they carried on this wonderful conversation, and then we saw the movie, and as we were walking out, this was at Universal Studios, as we were walking out, there was a TV reporter there that was interviewing people about the movie since it was opening day. And they chose what they thought was Rhonda, but it was Abigail. And they interviewed Abigail, and Abigail was speaking to this reporter and talking to her and answering questions and telling her how she felt. And that was amazing, to go from a little girl who stuttered and couldn't talk to anybody and was too shy to being interviewed for television. That was a really beautiful thing. One evening I looked over and I saw that there was somebody new that had come out, and I could always tell there was someone new because I didn't recognize them. I could recognize everyone in Rhonda's system. I could tell by their expressions, by their body language, and especially when they spoke, I would know who it was. Uh, this is really common with supporters. You talk to partners of multiples, and they learn to recognize the people who are out. Um, One time, even one of the little girls wanted to ask me for something, and she felt that I would say yes to her sister uh, more than I would say yes to her. And so she pretended to be one of the other insiders, and she came out and was asking me for something. And I knew it wasn't who she was pretending to be. I knew who it was, and I busted her on it. And I said, "You're not so and so. You're this is who you are." And she said, "Yeah, you're right." So you can really tell. So anyway, this new little girl peeked out. She was very shy, and so I started talking to her, and her name was Lizzie. And Lizzie lived in a cave where she felt she was safe. And I also at that time met Bugsy, and Bugsy was her brother, and Bugsy was her protector, and Bugsy was with her all the time, and all Bugsy's sole thing in his life was to make sure that Lizzie was safe and to protect her. And so I gave both of them a little stuffed animal, and so because Lizzie lived in a cave, then I decided that that's not a great place to live. So we went about designing a house, a little room for her to live in. So we designed a princess room with lots of pink things and lots of princess things, and lots of a nice garden outside. And I decided there was a flower I just picked outside that was inside, that was in the bedroom where we were. And so I said, "Lizzie, this flower is for you, and I want you to know that whenever you see a flower, you'll know that I love you and that you're safe." And so Lizzie became my little flower girl. So in the backyard here, I grow epiphelias, which are a type of succulent that have the most amazing flower, and they only bloom once a year. But when they bloomed, Lizzie would find one, and we developed a tradition. Uh, Traditions are really important. We developed a tradition that she would come over and she'd go, "Would you like to go for a walk?" And I'd go, "Yes." And so we'd hold hands and we'd walk out, and we'd sing la di da di da. And all of a sudden she'd go, "Look, there's a flower." And we would enjoy the flower. And so she became my magic flower girl, and she made all the flowers bloom. And that was a very special thing for her. And as Lizzie started feeling more and more safe and loved, she became more outgoing. And Bugsy started to feel like he could relax a little bit. He didn't have a life. He didn't do anything because he protected his sister. That was his sole purpose in life. So as Lizzie felt safer and safer, Bugsy felt better about uh, not being so on guard all the time. And one time we were back and swimming in the pool, and Bugsy asked if one of his sisters could watch Lizzie for a little bit, and because he felt safe about doing that. And so Bugsy went over and did a cannonball jump into the swimming pool. And this was the and this was the first time that Bugsy had been able to do something like that, to really have fun. And he swam over to the side, climbed back out, and ran and did another cannonball jump. And he was able to enjoy things and have fun. And that was a really special time. There was another time when I saw Lizzie kind of humming and sort of moving around. And so I asked her what she was doing. And she said that her older sister was teaching how to dance. And she was singing a song and practicing dancing. And that was a really big thing. It's those little things like that that are really big events. And Bugsy, Bugsy and I had a thing. Whenever he would see how well Lizzie was doing and how happy Lizzie was, Bugsy would start to kind of tear up because he was so happy. And we talked about that. And so I would joke with him. I go, Bugsy, is that a tear? Are you happy again? And he'd go, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And so that was a tradition I had with him. You develop these traditions and these little things that make the people inside, especially the littles, feel loved and safe. And that's so important. Those of you who have children, you know what a wonderful feeling it is to have your child express happiness, to feel happy, to feel joy. And I got that all the time. I got that so much from my kids and my family. Um, that's a really wonderful thing. I love that so much. Um, One of the things I did was when Rhonda was moving in here, um, I made a room just for the kids. And it was for their toys. She had a lot of toys. She had a lot of toys. And so I made a room just for them so they would feel welcome and loved. And when I was building it, before I put the carpet down, I sprayed on the wood subfloor, I sprayed a giant heart and I wrote, I love my kids on it. So I showed it to them, and then it was carpeted over, and so they would know that whenever they were up there and when they were playing, that they were within my heart and that they were loved. And that was an important thing to them. When I talk about Rhonda's insiders, especially the littles, uh, you'll hear me saying my kid. No, I had a little girl, my little boys, because it was my family. Rhonda's system was my family, and we had a wonderful family. So I had a little girl named Sarah who was about 4 to 5 years old, and she loved Disney princesses, and she loved tea time, and she would try to show me try and show her daddy how to drink tea right and how to have manners and all of those things. And there was a movie that came out called The Princess Diaries. And here in Hollywood, there's a theater that Disney owns called the El Capitan. And when they release a movie there, they'll often have an event as part of the premiere of the movie. And so for The Princess Diaries, what they had was in a building next to the theater, they had tea time with the Disney princesses. So you could buy a ticket and you'd go in and they had all the Disney princesses going around and they had like a high tea with the princesses. And so I took Sarah to that. And so we watched the movie, we went in and we were having tea. Now it was really interesting because we were with, well, first of all, it was a group of, I don't know how, maybe 50 mothers and their daughters, and then myself and Rhonda. Wasn't Rhonda, it was actually Sarah, but they saw a 48-year-old woman and me at the Princess Tea Party. Well, at our table, there were 2 other mothers and daughters. And one of the other mothers and daughters were just, they could see me interacting with Sarah, and she was a little girl. And they didn't know what was going on. They were kind of put off. But the other mother and her daughter were just so loving and just interacted with Sarah and interacted with me and became part of that. And that's just such a wonderful thing. But it was a great thing. Sarah loved that so much, and we had a great time. I'd like to tell you about one of the most wonderful things that I felt and had happened to me with Rhonda system, and it was with one of the babies. Woogie was one of the babies who held all of the sadness of the system, and there were times when Woogie would come out and you would just hear him, and he only said one word, and that was his name, and he would say Woogie, Woogie, in this sad, forlornful voice. And so I decided that I knew that he couldn't understand what I was saying. So I decided I would get up very close to his face because babies can't see too far. And I would just repeat his name, but in a really happy, happy manner. So I would go back and I would say, Woogie, 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 Woogie. And I would do that. So after doing that for a couple of years or so, I found that I could get Woogie out of his sadness and he would be okay uh, almost immediately when I started doing the happy Woogie in his face. So I did that. I kept doing that. And one day I looked over and I saw Woogie, and he was saying something different that I hadn't heard before. And so I listened closely, and he was saying wiggle. And so I talked to one of the other kids in the system, and they said that Woogie had made up a song and a dance, and his song was Wiggle, 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 and that he would wiggle to it, and that was his thing. And when that happened, I realized that I had taken away some of that sadness, that I had replaced some of that sadness with happiness. And that was a really big thing for me. And to see Woogie singing and dancing when all he had before was the sadness, the forlorn of a little sad baby, and now he was happy. That was really a wonderful thing. I had many different relationships with people in Rhonda's system, and it was wonderful. I had friends, I had companion, I had cohorts, I had partners. I married one of the other people in her system, Gloria, and we actually got married before Rhonda and I actually got married. If you are, say, just an acquaintance or a co-worker with a multiple, uh, there are a lot of things that you can do to make it better for them and to help in your relationship. And I believe that the number one thing you can do is to believe them. Believe them and respect their situation. They're not making this up or pretending. Uh, this is something that's very real. And if you believe them and treat them like this is a group of people, and you talk to each individual as an individual and not just like a part of someone or something. It's a real individual person, and that is the believing them is the number one thing that you can do for a multiple. Know that systems are comprised of many unique individuals, each with their own name and preferences. So listen to who you're talking with. Listen to who's talking with you. With some of the systems, it's okay to ask who's fronting, and with others, it's difficult for them. You can just ask them what they would like. That's a really important thing. If you're starting with this belief and you know that this is real, and just talk to people. Talk to them, ask them questions. If they hesitate, don't push it. Just be interested and pay attention. Just paying attention is one of the most important things you can do to help a multiple and to understand. And just listen to who's talking with you. If you start with the position of belief and you show them that you can be trusted, you can ask questions. You can ask how you would they would like to be treated. They would ask how you would like to um, address them. You can ask different questions, and you have to know that it doesn't matter. Sometimes they won't want to answer, and sometimes they can't answer, but you're showing interest and you're showing respect, and that's really important. Please just be open to the idea that you can be talking with a different person at different times during a conversation. This may seem strange to you, but again, it's only because you're not used to it. To me, it's perfectly normal. And to people that are involved with multiples, it's perfectly normal. You may be talking to one person at one moment and you're talking to another person at another moment. You may be talking about different things. I remember one time some friends of mine came by that were multiples, and we had lunch, and I was noticing that the person I just met had some really interesting tattoos. And so I asked her, I said, what does this particular tattoo mean? And she said, I don't know, it isn't mine. And to some people that may seem very strange, but it's I understood completely. And I said, oh, okay. And she was very grateful and really uh, liked the fact that I understood that that was not her tattoo. She really didn't know what it meant. It was another person in the system, and it was their tattoo. You should also remember that multiples have spent a lifetime hiding it. Hidden the fact that they're multiple. Secrecy is part of a defense mechanism that has developed. Secrets were kept. That was how they survived the trauma. And the secrets continue on to present day. And most multiples are very cautious about letting people know because people look at them like they're crazy. People look at them like they can't trust them. People look at them like they can't feel safe. And none of that is true. There are some situations or subjects that can be very triggering for a multiple. They can be very troublesome for them. It happens usually if you're making a reference to something that has happened to them uh, in their life or a situation that is very frightening to them. Generally, you shouldn't ask them about the traumas that they experience. You shouldn't ask them about their background or really anything that you think might be disturbing to anybody. You may ask them about any triggers that they have, and they may be able to tell you about them or they may not be able to. Remember that every person is different, every multiple is different, every human being is different, and there is no one right way, no one exact way to do anything. Um, Another thing that you should be aware of is that one of the aspects of dissociation is amnesia barriers between people in the system. Um, One person you're talking to may not have a memory of the last time you talked to another person. And you have to take this in consideration. One of the ways that dissociation works is that by creating these amnesia barriers, the trauma doesn't affect everyone in the system. The trauma is held by certain people in the system. And so that amnesia barrier carries on into everyday life. And so don't be surprised, and it's not a big thing if the person you're talking to doesn't remember the last conversation that you had with the uh, with someone else in that system, in that body. Just think of it like if you told something to one friend of yours, you wouldn't expect another different friend to know exactly what you said or to remember that. So it's the same thing when you're talking with the multiple, is that individuals in the system don't always communicate with each other, don't always remember, don't always know what is going on with another member of the system. Um, One of the things that I worked a lot with Rhonda, is to gain co-consciousness where everyone knows what's going on if they're not blocked. One of the ways that I worked with Rhonda in developing more co-consciousness was I would send messages from one person to another. And I would say, maybe I'd have one of the kids and I'd say, well, can you tell your sister this or can you let them know that? And that worked very well. Another thing I did that worked very well with my kids and with the littles is that I had a thing called Daddycom. And so whenever I'd announce Daddycom, that was a signal for everybody to pay attention. That I wanted everybody to know what was going on. And usually they got very excited. They wanted to hear what was happening. And so I would say, Daddycom, Daddycom, and then everybody would perk up and you could see, I could feel all these people listening. Switching is when one member of the system takes over the front and is control of the body. They will be the one talking to you. This is not necessarily a big dramatic thing like you would see on, like you saw maybe on the United States of Tara. There is not shaking and nodding heads and going into spaces and things like that. A lot of the times it happens instantaneously. You won't even notice it. You won't notice unless somebody tells you that you're talking to someone else, or if you notice that the person is different. It's a different person. Switching may not happen while you're talking to somebody, or switching may happen several times. It's not any one thing or another. I have a close friend who's multiple, and we talk on the phone. We do like FaceTime, talking on the phone often. And one of my favorite times is the end of the conversation, and everybody will come out and say goodbye, one after the other. And the kids will be saying goodbye, and I'll just have there's a very fast switching where everybody just comes out and says goodbye to me. And that is a really a great feeling, to feel that loving feeling and care about them and say goodbye to everybody. There are some advantages to being plural. Often different members of the system have different skill sets and can take over to complete a task. You can have someone that's very good at organizing, and that person will come out and organize everything. Someone that is very good at cooking, someone that's very good at any number of things that the other members of the system can't do. I just want to finish by saying that my relationship with the multiple is one of the most beautiful and wonderful things that's ever happened to me. And it is so rewarding and so amazing. And a relationship, whether it's a partner, whether it's a friend, whether it's a coworker, is very rewarding. One of the things I always say is that if you love a multiple, it comes back multiplied. And I've found that really to be true. I hope that this video has been helpful to you, and that you have learned something, and that you continue learning, and that you can use anything that I've helped you with, I don't know, that will help you with your relationships and supporting multiples. Believe me, it's well worth it, and it's a wonderful journey, and I hope that everything goes well with you. Thank you.